Hey, this is Jamey with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm going to talk about the game QE, which I played for the first time at game night the other night and had a blast playing it. This is probably one of the best games I've played this year. I really, really enjoyed it. QE at its heart is an auction game. You are spending money. There's an important detail involving that I'll get to in a second, but you're spending money to get some stuff, and then at the end of the game you score a bunch of points based on that stuff. And this is all centered around just such a cool mechanism that branches off into a bunch of different paths that I'll talk about today. And that is that when you place a bid, you can write down any amount of money. It's not a specific currency, it's just a number, because each player represents a different country. So these aren't US dollars, you don't have to convert them to British pounds or anything like that. It's just a number, but you can write down any number. And you can see what happened here. The first bid of the game, in our game, was this amount. A later bid was over $1 million. I later bid 20 million. But we could have also had a game where we bid very, very small amounts. So there's a bunch of different stuff happening here that I want to talk about that the game does in such a cool way, because this could have gone terribly wrong, this idea of letting players bid anything they want. So the first thing is you take turns being the active player in the game, and the active player, it rotates clockwise. The active player writes down their bid for the tile. Everyone's bidding to win a tile. The active player writes down their bid and exposes it. So their bid is face up. It sets kind of a foundation for what the other players are working around. And the other players, if they want, they don't have to try to outbid it. They may not want that tile. They may not want to spend more than that player. But so there is some open information to go on. It's not a complete blind bid, and I think that really saves the game there, that there's open information to give players some sort of foundation, some sort of idea of what to build off of. The second thing in these regards is that you can bid zero. Once per round, you can bid zero. So if there's something that you really don't want, you can just bid zero for it. You know you're not going to win it, but you actually get 2 points for doing so. So there is a slight incentive at certain times to just not jump into the bid, not go high. So a player could feasibly bid like this $1 million bid, and no one else even cares about it. At the same time, what happened in our game was this was the opening bid. So we thought, okay, the game might end up around, a couple $100,000. But apparently early on, one of the first players, in fact, on this original bid, another player bid $2 million. And we didn't know about that because it's a blind bid. We didn't know it happened. And so that player had information that we didn't have because that player knew how much they bid. And that may have influenced the amount of visible bids that they placed throughout the rest of the game. That ties into something else. So it's a blind bid. You don't know what the other players are bidding. But once per game, at least in the 5-player game, I think it might be different in the 3 to 4-player game. Once per game in a 5-player game, you can check off a box, and that lets you see the previous winning bid. So it gives you some information at the right time when you really want that information. It's once per game, but it really does help to have just that little bit of information of what you're going for there, what a recent winning bid was. You may do that at the right time, you may not. It's up to you. But I think it's really key that in general, you don't really know what the other players have bid. That keeps the whole element of the money secret. But you do have your own information. You know what you bid. So there were definitely times during our game where someone bid an extravagant amount of money and they still got outbid. So they had that information, that they knew that someone had actually bid more than them. So just by placing a bid, you get information about the other bids. I won't go into the details of how that worked, but if you watch like a how to play video, you can see the mechanism used to keep that information secret. It's very clever. It uses these whiteboard markers and some other tiles to do it. All of this wraps up it culminates kind of in 2 things at the end of the game that happen. One is players add up all the money that they spent on winning bids, because you only spend money if you actually win the tile, win the bid. And the player who spent the most money cannot win. So in our game, we spent millions of dollars, but one player spent more millions of dollars than the rest of us, and she wasn't eligible for the win. This is kind of like High Society, another game that I talked about recently. So all of these bids that you place during the game, all this money that you're spending, any number that you're writing down, you're free to do that. But in the end, it matters if you spent the most. The other element here is if you spent the least, you get 7 extra points, which in this game is a lot. 7 points is a lot of points in this game. So that's another consideration. Like how do you balance that? Yeah, you want to spend less money than other players so that you don't get kicked out of the game. But at the same time, if you can somehow win a few tiles and spend by far, or not by far, but at least less than all the other players, you get 7 extra points, which is quite big. And it's a nice balancing act at the end of the game for players who maybe have spent a lot and won a bunch of tiles and somehow got lucky and didn't overspend, aren't kicked out of the game. Compared to maybe a player who bid well but didn't quite bid well enough, they actually get kind of a compensation prize with those 7 points, which I think keeps the end of the game really close. As you can see, all of these things tie into this mechanism of writing down any bid that you want. They make it really fun. Every decision in the game ends up being so interesting because of this mechanism in QE. And yeah, I had a blast with it. If any of these things that I mentioned today make you think of another game or another thing that you really love about QE, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Specifically, maybe we'll try to focus on blind bids. If you can think of another game that has a blind bid, but makes that blind bid really, really interesting, I'd love to hear about that in the comments. And also, I might do a video soon about games that use whiteboard markers. And so if you have a favorite game that uses a whiteboard and a dry erase marker, I might be trying to put together a top 10 list. So let me know if you have a few games in that realm that you want to mention in the comments. All right, thanks.